He is the GM of the Atlanta Falcons, Thomas Dimitroff. How are you, Thomas?
Rich, I am doing well. Like, what would the pilgrimage to the draft be without a Rich Eisen visit?
That's true. You are correct on that front. So where are you on the Super Bowl 51-ness of it all? You just heard what your coach said, that he's past it but not over it. What about you, Thomas?
Yeah, I think that's one of those things, Rich, where we spent a lot of time, and I was so proud of how the team came together, and very proud of Dan Quinn as a coach and the coaching staff, and there was a lot of work done. So obviously, the ending's disappointing, but I think we're in a really good spot. Last year we recovered from our 8-8 finish, and I thought Dan did a fantastic job. I have all the faith in the world that Dan's going to bring this team back around, and we're going to be in even a better place next year. I think we have most of our offense back, and we have a young budding defense that we're going to continue to build. And Dan is really direct with me and our staff about what we need on the defensive side. So, again, disappointed, of course, but very optimistic.
Yeah, I was going to. I guess that's my follow-up question right there. Is how do you, as someone who's in charge of building a roster, look at something like that? That you're that close, or how difficult it might be to get that close again?
Well, I've said publicly and humbly that I don't feel like we have any major holes in this roster. I think the last couple of years working with Dan on this has been great. I think being able to know, the nuances of the roster build from the head coach and what we feel together has been so beneficial. And I think we do some fine-tuned tweaks here and there. And, again, Dan has this team believing. As you know, he does a great job relating to the millennials, which we all know can be a challenge. And, in a good way, Dan knows. He knows what music to play. He knows how to speak with these guys, of course, and he knows how to motivate. So, again, I'm very encouraged.
How about the boss? What's it like chatting with the boss, when it's all said and done after that with Arthur Blank, Thomas?
Arthur Blank was really good through the season with us, even as the beginning of the season was going on and having realistic views about what we were going to do, how we were going to approach the season. And as the season went on and things were going well and we had a couple blips along the road, he was always very, very positive. I was really happy with his leadership with Dan. He's very mindful about how he discusses with Dan and talks big picture and shares it with both Dan and me. And so, obviously, he had his time when he went down on the sideline before the end of the game. He went up or down with a real hop in his step, and as things started getting tighter and tighter, I'm sure it was difficult. But after the game, again, stayed as positive as he could be. He is very encouraged by Dan and our team, and had some really good things to say, and was very optimistic about moving forward.
Falcons general manager Thomas Dimitroff. One last question on it, Thomas, is are you past it, over it? I mean, seriously, how often do you think about this?
This is one of those things where I can be immersed in something and everything is good and we're building, or it could be me being out in Aspen for a few days with my kids on a snowboard, losing myself in that, or on my bike, or whatever it may be. But when I'm, every once in a while, when I hit something that reminds me of championship sport in general, it doesn't even have to be football. It can be World Series. It could be basketball championships. I have a good friend in R.C. Buford. Whenever I tend to talk to him, I think about historic organizations, and my head goes there every once in a while.
So you didn't turn to red meat or anything like that, right, Thomas? You didn't get a burger, start eating candy? You didn't do that, did you, Thomas?
I did not. I probably thought about doing other things, but to Dan's comment, not over it, of course not. And I think, I just really believe this group that we have and the characters that we have on this team, I believe they're going to step up, take the kick in the shin, and move forward.
All right, let's move on now to what's going on right here at the Combine. Is there a semblance of a draft board for the Atlanta Falcons right now? Do you have one somewhere that you've already built prior to the Combine?
We do. Interestingly enough, usually, as you know, a lot of teams have January to pick up with the coaching staff, and they're working on things. This is the first time in quite a few years that I've been in the Super Bowl since my days in New England. So we did some really good preparation. Scott Pioli and our personnel staff really teed Dan and myself up moving forward, going into these draft preparations. So we feel very strong where we are right now with our free agency focus as well as the draft. We have quite a bit of work still to do. A lot of massaging of the board, but we definitely do have a strong board. We've had a few sets of meetings already, and as you know, and I've talked to you before, I value the combine. I definitely don't just cash it off as a medical meeting and watch guys run around in shorts. I really do get a keen look at the athleticism of a lot of these players.
And on that front, where do you stand on the seemingly new rule that folks like Mixon and Chad Kelly aren't there, that kids who have off-the-field issues don't get the invite because it's a privilege to be working out at the combine? Where do you stand on that subject, Thomas?
I mean, Rich, there's different views and visions of that, of course, and we had some discussions today in a couple meetings. I understand the stance from the league. I know that it can be difficult for certain teams because, look, the reality is certain teams are much more open to have players with character issues on their roster. Other teams are a lot more suspect of it. And I think in the end, if a team really wants to interview these guys and run them through workouts, they're going to seek them out anyway. And you and I both know the very talented players that are dealing with some of this are going to end up playing in this league. It's just they're going to have to be a little more creative with how they get their information. So
you think this is a good rule that they've been excluded from the combine?
Well, I think what it is I think it brings to attention a lot of the issues of the players that we're talking about here. It brings on, obviously, more scrutinizing by the public and the media if you do, in fact, bring a player like in that has been basically ostracized from this league process. I think there are benefits to it, and I hate to play on the fence on this, but I also think there are challenges to it, and I think we will work through it this year and see how it all works out. And again, I'm a big believer in adapting, and if you can't adapt in this league, you're not going to survive. And the teams that want to go after these guys, you're going to have to be creative about it.
So I know you're obviously deep at your running back position. Is Mixon on the Falcons draft board?
Yeah, he's still up there.
And at what point does Arthur Blank chime in on this front?
Oh, I'm sure he does, and we've talked a lot about that. And Arthur has some very strong opinions about this, as I do. I feel very strongly about people when it comes to these issues that we're suggesting with a guy like Mixon, and I say that he's on our board right now. That does not mean these players that we're talking about will stay on our board for long. We make sure that we are very well thought out most of this, and as you know, sometimes when you're talking about issues like this, the conversation isn't that drawn out.
Thomas Dimitroff of the Falcons, front office general manager since 2008 here on the Rich Eisen Show for a couple of more minutes. So what is the deepest position, you think, in the 2017 Combine and Draft?
Wow, every year people ask me that, and I realize that, obviously there's always going to be receivers. Every time you and I look at that receiver board, you're thinking, wow. I mean, you're trying to work through it, and I always say the scout on our team who's responsible for the cross-checks of the receivers, I think we should pay him a bonus because there's so much work in evaluating those guys. So I think there's some depth there, of course. I think there's some depth on the defensive side. I think there's some pass rushers in this draft class, which will be interesting to see. And I think offensive line wise, like every year, some strength there and some challenges there as far as where you're going to pick. But all in all, I think every draft has its benefits, of course, and its strong points.
And when you mention receivers, Julio Jones, what's the deal with his toe? Do you think he's going to have surgery on it?
I think Julio's going to take some time and see how he feels. And Julio is a very resilient football player, body, mind, and soul. And I think the time that he spends in the next few weeks after he's been off since the Super Bowl, I think will determine when he does decide one way or another. I've heard he's doing really well, so I'm not really fearful of it.
I got to tell you, man. I don't want to bring up any bad spots here. That catch he made was ridiculous, Thomas. I thought you had that thing sewn up when he called. I thought that was the seminal moment of the Super Bowl. That would be something that you guys look back years from now as the moment it all went down. That catch was ridiculous, Thomas.
That catch, you're right, Rich. It was one of those that you think, given all the debate and banter about acquiring Julio and such. I mean, that was one of those that you really believe that's why you go after a player like that, because he came down with an amazing catch. And as you know, he continues to do that, and we're hope that we can let him sort of thrive for years and years to come here, because he is so, not only is he on the field, but as you know, our fan base, I mean, Matt Ryan gets massive crowd noise when he comes out through the tunnel, but if you ever hear Julio come out, you'd be amazed.
And lastly, Devontae Freeman's agent definitely chimed in during Super Bowl week. What is your thought process on locking him up long term, or anything else with Devontae Freeman, Thomas?
Well, you know, that's one of those discussions, of course, where we all felt, and I've talked to Christina about it. You know, that's an inopportune delivery, of course, at least in our mind. But what I did know is it wasn't going to be that big of a distraction, and it was very little of a distraction, because in our building, our two running backs get along very, very well, and they handled the situation marvelously. I think, you know, he is such a quality player for us, and he runs and epitomizes what we're looking for from a running back, Rich, because he is an urgent runner, and he can be very, very driven at every level. He's versatile. So, again, another guy we'd like to get figured out here in the relatively near future.
Well, I mean, that's an excellent roadmap for me. What do I epitomize when I run, Thomas, certainly in terms of your evaluation and what running backs for the Falcons do?
I've had you on for the last, 12 hours straight. I left the TV on all night. Probably not a good thing, but NFL Network's been running, and I see you come up randomly, and I'm thinking, you know what? What we need to do a little bit is just get you a little bit more fluid in your stride, right?
Okay. Yep.
I think we need to work on that a little bit. But otherwise, hey man, you're turning the corner. Are you running again this year?
Yes, Thomas. Yes, for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital as well. So we're raising money for a third straight year, and I had Michael Johnson train me last week.
Well, I'm sure you are going to be fleet of foot.
Thank you for your support, as always, and for your friendship and calling into the show. I will see you in Indianapolis.
I can't wait. I look forward to it.
You
Thanks
got
so
it.
much,
You
man.
bet. That's Thomas Dimitroff of the Atlanta Falcons.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.